My name is Madison Hayes. I'm 31 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated my entire existence like a polite footnote to my brother's story. Not cruel, not dramatic, just consistently, reliably invisible. The kind of invisible that sneaks up on you so slowly, you almost convince yourself it's normal. Almost. My brother Derek is 3 years older, and growing up, everything in our house orbited around him. His baseball games, his college applications, his first job, his promotions, his apartment in downtown Chicago. My mom kept a photo album on the coffee table, still does, and I counted once, 43 photos of Derek, 11 of me. And 3 of those were holiday cards where I happened to be standing next to him. I was the artsy one, which in my family translated roughly to the one we're not sure what to do with. I drew constantly. Sketchbooks, napkins, margins of textbooks. My dad would pass by my desk, glance at whatever I was working on, and say very nice in the same tone he used when the weather was unremarkable. My mom was kinder about it. She'd say things like, "You're so creative, honey," right before pivoting to ask Derek whether his firm had announced the new partner track yet. When I graduated and said I wanted to teach middle school art, my dad sat me down and had what he called a realistic conversation. He said teaching was a good, stable option for someone with my interests. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful for the ceiling he'd quietly installed over my head. Derek, on the other hand, became a financial advisor. He wore the suits, said the right things at the right dinners, and my parents spoke about his career with a reverence that made it sound like he was personally holding the economy together. Mom once referred to him at a neighborhood cookout as our success story. I was standing 6 feet away, holding a paper plate. The thing nobody in my family knew, the thing I had deliberately, carefully kept from all of them, was that for the past 4 years, I had been building something. At first it was just a creative outlet. After grading papers and running after-school art club 3 days a week, I'd come home to my small apartment in Columbus, make a cup of tea, and draw. I had this character I'd invented during a particularly brutal week in year 1 of teaching a small, scrappy girl named Sunday, with mismatched socks and a backpack bigger than she was, navigating a world that kept underestimating her. I started posting the illustrations online, just to have somewhere to put them. Within 6 months, I had a following I didn't expect. Within a year, a licensing inquiry I almost dismissed as spam. I called my college friend Priya, who had gone into business development, and she talked me off the ledge and then helped me negotiate. We incorporated. We filed trademarks on Sunday as a character. We turned down the first 2 offers because Priya said we could do better. She was right. By the time my dad's retirement party rolled around in late October, I had signed an acquisition deal with a children's media company based in New York for $4.2 million. The wire had cleared 11 days earlier. I'd sat in my car in the school parking lot after getting the confirmation email and cried until the bell rang, then walked inside and taught a 6th grader how to blend watercolors without saying a word about it to anyone. I hadn't told my family, not because I was hiding it forever, but because I knew exactly what would happen, and I wanted to choose the moment carefully. I also, if I'm being honest, wanted to sit with it alone for a little while. It was mine. It had always been mine, built in the margins of a life they'd decided wasn't impressive enough to pay attention to. For a few weeks, I just wanted to hold it without their hands in it. My mom had organized the retirement party at my parents' house in Naperville. She'd gone all out, catered appetizers, a rented tent in the backyard, a slideshow of my dad's career highlights that she'd spent 3 weekends assembling. I drove in that Saturday morning with a bottle of champagne and a card I'd spent too long choosing. Derek was already there when I arrived, because Derek was always there first, positioned in whatever room needed an audience the most. He was standing in the kitchen talking to my Uncle Phil about interest rates, gesturing with his drink like he was presenting to a board. My mom floated over to me, gave me a quick hug, and immediately said, "Derek got here at noon. He helped your father set up the tent." "That's great," I said. "You look tired," she said, smoothing the collar of my jacket the way she's done since I was 9. "Are you sleeping? I keep telling you, teaching wears people out. You really should consider something with more reasonable hours." "I'm fine, Mom," I said. "Where do you want the champagne?" The party filled up by late afternoon relatives, my dad's former colleagues, neighbors who had watched Derek and me grow up and had asked the same questions they'd been asking for a decade. Derek held court in the backyard, my parents nearby, the three of them a gravitational cluster that pulled conversation their way. I helped carry food, refreshed people's drinks, talked to my cousin Tessa about her new apartment. I was good at being useful. I'd had a lot of practice. My dad gave a toast before dinner that made my mom cry. He talked about building a life, about the people who made it worth it, about Derek's accomplishments with a specificity that suggested he'd rehearsed them, and about me in a single sentence that was something like, and Madison, who's always been our steady one, our rock. It landed the way those things always landed, warmly meant, quietly erasing. Derek caught my eye across the yard and raised his glass with a small smile. Solidarity, almost, for half a second, and then he turned away to laugh at something our uncle said. It was during dinner that it happened. We were at the long tables my parents had set up under the tent, the candles flickering, and the conversation had circled around to careers the way it always did when this particular collection of people was in one place. My Aunt Renee asked Derek about his latest big account. My mom filled in the details he was too modest to volunteer, which he was never too modest to volunteer but let her do anyway because it sounded better coming from her. Then my Aunt Renee turned to me. The way you turn to the quieter kid at the table after you've already fed the louder one. And Madison, you're still teaching? Art, right? Still teaching, I said. Middle school. I love it. That's so sweet, she said, and moved on. Derek set down his fork, doing the thing he did when he was about to be charming at someone else's expense. She's also got her little side project, he said. To the table more than to me. The drawings. What do you call it Sunday? The little cartoon kid? It's a character, I said. An illustrated series. Right. He smiled at the table like we were sharing a joke. It's cute. She's got fans online. The way he said fans online carried exactly the tone our dad used when he said the weather was unremarkable. You still doing that, Maddie? Still drawing Sunday and posting for your followers? I looked at him across the table. The candles were warm. My mom was smiling in that distant, polite way she smiled when she wasn't really tracking a conversation she'd already decided didn't need tracking. I'm not posting anymore, I said. I wrapped the series up a few weeks ago. Derek tilted his head. Oh, yeah? Why, run out of ideas? No, I said, keeping my voice level. I sold it. He waited a beat, like he was expecting a punchline. Sold it. Your little cartoon drawings. The character. The IP. The licensing portfolio. The whole thing. Yes. He laughed not meanly. Just with the casual confidence of someone who has never had to take his siblings seriously before. Okay. And what, someone paid you, what, a couple $1,000s for your little doodle hobby? That's actually not bad, Maddie. Good for you. The table had gotten quieter. My dad's former colleague across from me had stopped reaching for the breadbasket. I picked up my water glass. 4.2 million, I said. The quiet got very complete. Derek stared at me. He stopped. Started again. What? $4.2 million, I repeated. A children's media company in New York acquired the Sunday character and all associated rights. We closed the deal 11 days ago. My mom's hand went to her chest. My dad blinked twice, slowly, like his brain was buffering. That's, Derek shook his head. That's not, he let out a short laugh that had lost all its ease. Maddie, you're joking. I'm not. You can't just a cartoon character doesn't. He looked at our dad, then back at me, recalculating something. You drive a 2017 Civic. You live in that apartment on the 3rd floor with the broken elevator. If you had $4 million, we'd... No? I said. How? You haven't asked me a real question about my work in 4 years. You know I teach art. You know I have a character named Sunday because I mentioned it once at Thanksgiving and you made the same little doodle comment then that you just made now. You've never once asked what the project was actually doing, what it had grown into, what it might become. You assumed because you'd already decided. Before I tell you what my brother said next, and what happened when the rest of that table processed what I'd just said, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. I grew up understanding that love in my family was expressed through attention, and attention in my family was a finite resource that had been allocated before I was old enough to compete for it. Derek was good at the things our parents recognized: tangible, visible, legible success. A scoreboard they knew how to read. I was good at things that happened quietly, in sketchbooks, in the hours after everyone else was asleep. I started drawing Sunday during my first year of teaching, which was also the hardest year of my adult life. I had 22 12-year-olds, a classroom with one functioning projector, no department budget, and a building coordinator who kept forgetting to order basic supplies. I was staying until 6 most evenings, driving home in the dark, eating whatever I could heat up fast, and falling asleep on the couch with a sketchbook on my stomach. Sunday started as a way to process the kids I was teaching. She was the student who sat in the back and noticed everything, the one who got called difficult because she saw through people too clearly and didn't know yet how to be quiet about it. She had enormous eyes and wore mismatched socks on purpose, and carried this huge backpack full of things she'd found interesting and couldn't throw away. I posted her first on a tiny blog that I think 3 people read. One of them messaged me and said I was this kid. That was the moment I kept drawing. By the end of year 2, I had a newsletter with 11,000 subscribers. By year 3, a licensing inquiry from a stationery company. Priya walked me through all of it. She'd been telling me for years that Sunday was something real, something bigger than a side project, and every time she said it, I half believed her and half expected to wake up. I did not call my parents to tell them when the stationery deal closed. I did not text my brother when we got our first retail placement. I tried once. Early on, I mentioned at a family dinner that I'd had a small licensing inquiry, and my dad said, "Oh, fun." And my mom said, "Just be careful you don't spread yourself too thin with teaching." And Derek said he'd seen a thing online about how content creators rarely turned hobbies into real income. The conversation moved on inside of 40 seconds. After that, I kept it to myself. I want to be clear. I didn't plan the retirement party as a revenge moment. I had not showed up with a prepared speech or a dramatic reveal coordinated for maximum impact. I had simply made a decision that when the moment came, and I knew eventually a moment would come, I wasn't going to deflect. I wasn't going to minimize my own news to protect someone else's comfort. I was going to tell the truth in the same tone I used when I told my students the truth. Calmly, clearly, without apology. The moment came when my brother called Sunday a little doodle hobby. Back at the table, the silence had stretched long enough that my Aunt Renee was looking between Derek and me with the expression of someone realizing they'd sat down at the wrong movie. My dad cleared his throat. Madison. He used my full name, the way he used to when he was trying to get his footing. "Is this you're telling us you sold?" He trailed off. "Yes," I said. "A children's media company called Brighthaven acquired the Sunday character and all associated rights. 4.2 million. The wire cleared on the 14th. My mom made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Derek had gone still. The easy, settled confidence that he wore like a second skin had developed a crack down the middle, and I watched him trying to close it. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, and his voice was different now. Less performance in it. "I'm telling you now," I said. That's not the same thing." He pushed back slightly from the table, not standing, just creating space. "You just dropped this in the middle of Dad's party. You couldn't have called? Texted? You had to make it He stopped, swallowed. "You made it a thing. You called my work a little doodle hobby," I said. "You said that in front of 10 people and laughed. What should I have done?" "I didn't know," he said. "No," I agreed. "You didn't, because you never asked." My dad put both hands flat on the table, the way he did when he was trying to think. "We would have listened," he said. But even as he said it, something in his expression acknowledged that this wasn't entirely true. And he knew it, and I could see him knowing it. "When?" I asked, not angrily, genuinely. "When would you have listened? When I mentioned the licensing inquiry and the conversation moved on in under a minute? When I tried to explain what Sunday was about and Mom said to be careful not to spread myself too thin? When Derek sent me that article about how content creators don't make real money? I looked around the table. "I learned a long time ago to stop trying to get you to hear something you'd already decided wasn't worth hearing." My mom reached across and touched my arm. Sweetheart, we didn't know it was serious. That's my point, I said gently. You didn't know because you didn't ask. You made a decision about what I was doing before you had any information. And then you stopped looking. Derek stood up then, pushing his chair back all the way. He walked a few steps away from the table, hands in his pockets, and stood with his back half turned. He was doing the math, I realized. Not the financial math that was simple enough. He was doing the other math. The kind where you recalculate every conversation you've had with someone over the past 4 years and realize what you missed. My Uncle Phil, God bless him, quietly reached for the breadbasket and said well in the tone of a man who had decided this was above his pay grade and he was going to eat bread until it was over. My dad said, quietly, I don't understand how we didn't know. I know you don't, I said. That's what I'm trying to explain. I excused myself from the table and walked into the house to get some air. I stood in my parents' kitchen, hands on the counter, looking at the same fruit bowl they'd had there since I was 7. My phone buzzed. Priya, how's the party? I typed back, interesting, I'll tell you later. Then I stood there and breathed, and let the familiar smell of my childhood home coffee and that particular brand of dish soap my mom had used forever settle around me. Derek came in 5 minutes later. He leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed, which was his defensive posture, the one he'd had since we were teenagers. He looked at me for a long moment without saying anything. Then, you really sold it. I really sold it. He exhaled. 4 million. 4.2. He rubbed his face with one hand. He stopped, started differently. At the firm, I talk about spotting potential. I talk about it with clients constantly, identifying what's undervalued before everyone else sees it. He laughed, and it was the most honest laugh I'd heard from him in years, short, uncomfortable, directed at himself, my own sister. You weren't looking, I said. Not cruelly, it was just accurate. No, he said, I wasn't. He was quiet for a moment. Why Sunday? Where did that come from? I studied him. He was asking because he actually wanted to know, not because he was filling air. She's the kid in the back of the classroom, I said. The one who gets passed over because she's not loud about her abilities. She sees everything, but nobody's watching her. He was quiet long enough that I knew he understood what I wasn't saying directly. I was awful to you about this, he said finally. You were consistent, I said. With how the whole house operated, you were consistent. That's not better. No, I agreed. It's not. We stood in the kitchen while the party continued outside, muffled conversation and the scrape of chairs. My brother looked like a person who had been handed a mirror at an unexpected angle. I didn't feel triumphant. Exactly. I felt tired, and clear, and more present in my own body than I had in years. I went back outside eventually. My mom found me by the dessert table and held my hand for a moment without saying anything, which was more honest than most things she'd said all day. My dad hugged me, a long one, the kind that meant he was rearranging something internally and didn't have words for it yet. I let him. I drove home that night with the windows cracked despite the October cold, needing the air. I had a voice memo from Priya that I saved to listen to in the morning. I sat in my parking lot for a while before going in, watching the light in the apartment above mine. It was complicated, what I felt. Not the clean, lit-up satisfaction I might have imagined. More like the feeling after a hard conversation in my classroom, when a kid who'd been carrying something finally set it down, relief mixed with the tenderness of an old muscle being used correctly for the first time. The weeks that followed were quiet, in the way that things are quiet after a structural change. My mom called 3 days later, not to perform regret, but to ask questions, real ones, halting ones, the kind that meant she was working through something. She asked how long Sunday had been running. She asked what acquiring meant. She asked if I was happy. I told her yes, I was. My dad called a week after that. He said he'd been thinking about the night of his party. He said there were things he'd told himself about what was fair, about how he'd divided his attention and why. And some of them didn't hold up when he looked at them directly. He said this slowly, like a man carrying something heavy and being careful not to drop it. He said he was sorry. He didn't dress it up or qualify it into something smaller. He said he was sorry, and he meant it. I told him I appreciated it. I told him I'd need time, Not time to punish him. Just time. The way you need time after a sprain before you can put full weight on something again. He said he understood. Derek took longer. He texted a few times, brief things, checking in. Then one Sunday in November, he drove to Columbus and took me to lunch, which he had never done before in our adult lives, always me going to Chicago, always meeting on his turf and his schedule. We sat at a diner near my apartment, and he asked me, for the first time, to tell him about Sunday from the beginning. Not the business timeline. The actual story. Where she came from. What she meant. Why I kept drawing her all those years when no one was watching. I told him. All of it. He listened without interrupting, which was something I had not experienced from him before. At the end, he said, "She's you, isn't she?" "She was," I said. "She's also every kid who's ever sat in the back of a room full of people who looked right past them." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about what you said. About how you tried to tell us and we didn't hear you." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I used to think the way things worked in our family was just natural. Who got attention? Why? I thought it was based on outcomes, on results. I didn't think about how much of it was a decision made before any results existed." He looked up. "That wasn't fair to you." "No," I said. "It wasn't, and I made it worse." "You did." He didn't try to explain it into something smaller. He sat with it. That mattered more than the words. Here is what I know now, that I didn't know at 22 when I sat in my car at the end of a 12-hour day, too exhausted to draw, and too stubborn to stop. The belief other people have in you is a gift, but it has never been a requirement. I built Sunday in the margins of a life my family had already decided was secondary. I built her after night shifts and parent-teacher conferences and staff meetings that went 45 minutes over. I built her when my brother was getting toasted at family dinners and I was passing the bread. I built her because she was real to me, when almost nothing else in my external world confirmed that my instincts were worth trusting. That mattered. Not the $4 million, though I will not pretend the $4 million does not matter. But the fact of having trusted myself in the absence of anyone else's trust. That is the thing I would want someone watching this to actually hear. Family favoritism is not just an unfairness between siblings. It is a daily, cumulative lesson that one person's potential is worth investing in and another's is not. And if you absorb that lesson long enough, you start to teach it to yourself. You start to call your own ideas little. You start to preemptively minimize before anyone else can do it, because it hurts less when you do it first. I am not interested in that lesson anymore. I unlearned it slowly, and then all at once in the backyard of my parents' house in Naperville, with a candle flickering between me and my brother, while our dad's retirement party went quiet around us. My family is different now. Not fixed, that's too clean a word for what's actually happening, which is messier and slower and more real than fixed. My mom corrects herself mid-sentence sometimes, catches herself doing the old thing, and redirects. My dad asks about my work with a directness he never had before. Derek and I text more than we used to. He still occasionally reverts to the default older brother mode, and I call it out now instead of swallowing it. And he usually catches himself. It's not the warm movie version of reconciliation. But it's true. Which is better. I still teach middle school art 3 days a week. I don't have to financially. I don't have to, but I want to. I want to be in rooms with 12-year-olds who are figuring out what they're good at before the world gets too many votes on the question. Last spring, one of my students showed me a character she'd been drawing in the margins of her math notebook. A small girl with enormous eyes and something stubborn in her expression. I told her to keep drawing. I told her the margins were exactly the right place to start. Our team at Revenge Fire creates stories built around real emotional truths, the kind that live in family dynamics, in the space between who we're told we are and who we actually become. This story was written to explore what it means to build something real when the people who are supposed to believe in you first have already stopped looking. If it resonated with you, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. These stories travel further than you'd think.